Hi everyone, my name is Lisa Fong and I'm on the partner marketing team at Pinterest. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to go over creative and ad best practices. This is our last webinar in the series and we saved the best for last. If you haven't started advertising with us yet, don't worry. These creative best practices are for both organic and promoted pins. So the best practices that you see are for both organic and promoted, and we use the same techniques to get the most out of both your free traffic, and if you want to give it a boost, you can try promoted pins as well. So for our agenda today, we're going to go over 3 sections. And so the first section is just general creative best practices for Pinterest, and that'll be applicable across the board. And then next we're going to go over creative by objective, so thinking about whether your goals are traffic or brand awareness, things like that. We'll cover different objectives and the creative strategies there. And lastly, we're going to go over a few verticals and some of the best practices that we've seen in pins from home, food and drink, beauty, and style. So before we jump into these chapters, I'll give a brief overview of Pinterest. People use Pinterest to plan. They come to Pinterest to discover and do the things that they love, and what they're really doing is planning. And this planning behavior is unique to Pinterest. If you think about it, you'll go to Google to search for information, you'll go to Facebook to connect with friends, and you'll go to Snapchat or Instagram to share a moment. But when you go to Pinterest, you're really going there to discover and plan for you. So to help pinners discover and do the things they love, we're building Pinterest. And it's 100 billion ideas personalized for every pinner so they can figure out which ideas are best for their lives. And that means that we make it easy for people to find the right idea and then also take action. And so for businesses like yours, they use Pinterest to drive incremental sales. In research we did with Oracle, we found that the majority of retailer sales are incremental to their business after running a promoted pin campaign. And lastly, that new customers provide the strongest sales lift. So new customers drove 10 times more sales lift than existing customers. And now that I've reviewed why your business should be on Pinterest, Adrienne will walk you through the first set of best practices.
Awesome. So again, we're going to be talking about the overall best practices for Pinterest. So keeping in mind that these are best practices for content across the platform, meaning both pins that you might be looking to promote with advertising or pins that you're just having live on your boards, on your business profile, that are just organic pins from your business. All right. So when thinking about creative within the pins you're putting on Pinterest, we really recommend thinking about how people are actually using the platform and why you as a brand can provide value to that pinner and drive them to take action within your brand. We may have talked a little bit about this in other webinars, but just imagine why someone's coming to Pinterest and what their mindset might be. Sometimes people are coming in at different stages of what they're looking for, and sometimes they're coming in and going through an entire decision-making process within Pinterest at that time. So really, I'm just kind of building here, looking at the different mindsets of a pinner when they come on. So many people might be scrolling through their feed right when they get on to Pinterest to find ideas for maybe a style they like, a recipe, something they want to do in the future, like a DIY project or home ideas or travel. So they're really starting in that kind of just looking phase. And then they begin to start narrowing it down once they locked in on an idea, and they can go from that just looking to, hey, maybe I could pull that off, or actually, maybe I really need to get this right now, which is usually the mindset I'm in because I want to buy things. So they continue to travel down this consumer journey, and then that intent that they had when they originally got on with just looking can really start to increase, and it's going to be much stronger as they get down that funnel, as they start narrowing it down and really deciding on what they want. So because of this and the nature of how people are thinking about ideas that they find on Pinterest, you as an advertiser or a brand on Pinterest may want to consider having different types of creative for all the stages that someone could be in when they're coming in and finding your pin or your idea across the platform. All right. So again, just want to reiterate before we get into even more deep creative best practices, something really important to remember with Pinterest is that pins are ideas. And there are really three primary pillars to making great ideas or pins for your brand on Pinterest. So the three things that your pin should be is first, helpful. People want to discover ideas that make their life better. This can mean offering tips, advice, instructions, in addition to just you showcasing products that you want them to buy. And then secondly, making sure that your pins and your creative is beautiful. Pinterest is obviously a really visual platform, so make sure your images are shot to fit that platform. And we usually recommend imagery that either is or is as close to possible as professionally done or shot as you can pull off. So you really want that beautiful, high quality imagery. And then lastly, just making sure your pins are actionable. So ideas that people find on Pinterest are intended to be done in real life. Make it easy for them to take action with the idea that you're providing for them. All right, so now we have our three pillars, but how do you achieve those three things? And we want to provide you with a couple tips and tactics on how you can actually make the pins helpful, beautiful, and actionable. So really getting that creative to map back to those three pillars. From a Pinterest internal study we did, we actually looked across over 100,000 pins, and we were able to identify these 7 different tips or tactics to make pins more helpful, beautiful, and actionable. Now, I don't want you to think that you need to use all of these things at once, so you won't necessarily need to use them all at once either. You can rather mix and match them, or you might want to use different strategies depending on what your objectives are, and you might want to be testing and learning as well to see which of these tips or tactics work best for the kind of brand that you have on Pinterest. I think the biggest takeaway here is that these are different things that you have in your toolbox of things to test and learn when you're creating pins, as well as when you're optimizing any advertising campaigns that you might be running if you're advertising with us. All right, so without any further ado, the 7 tactics that you can see here: detailed descriptions, how-tos, multi-product shots, lists, text overlays, tasteful branding, as well as having branded colors and settings. I'm actually going to go into, in the next several slides, talking through examples of each of these so you can really get a good idea of what they mean. So starting with detailed descriptions. Detailed descriptions give pinners the info that they need to decide whether a pin or an idea is actually for them and relevant for them and what they're looking for. Also including more keywords in the description that are relevant to the idea make the pin more likely to show up in search results. So when someone's actually searching for a specific item, product, or idea, your pin would be more likely to show up organically, or if it were promoted even, if it has more keywords that are relevant to that idea within the pin. So let's look through these examples. You can see that Nike provided information to speak to the utility of the product. So from yoga to bar class, this pin provides context on why and how this product's helpful. Also, if it wasn't as descriptive, someone might not even really realize what this pin is for or when would I use this item, right? So that's really helpful that it has all the context within the description. Secondly, looking at the Ziploc pin, this ties to utility and helpful information to parents who are looking to feed their kid vegetables. I'm sure a lot of parents have this issue, so this is just a really cool idea of enticing someone to learn more about how they can actually get their kid to eat vegetables, and it entices people also through the keywords like recipe, health food, and picky eaters. And then with the Adore Me pin, if you're moving down here on the right, you can see they added language such as take our style quiz and get 50% off your first set. So those are really strong calls to action and letting someone know what they're supposed to do with this content right there within the description. So once I see this, I can really understand why or what this Adore Me brand wants me to do, and if I'm interested in that, I can click through on it. And then lastly, with dryers and the Mad Scientist floats, this is really interesting because they go ahead and use the description to call out all of the different steps that someone might need to actually create these Mad Scientist floats. So they're using the description to showcase the instruction and then just have a really cool image at the top that is enticing, and then using the description to get more in detail. Awesome. So we're moving on to the next tip, using how-tos and step-by-steps. So, or other tutorials for that matter. Other tutorials and how-tos and step-by-steps can really be used to help break down complicated projects and make it easier for people to bring ideas to life. So they give you all the info that you need to get out of it, and do what the pin helps someone to do. So there's actually a couple different ways that you can achieve how-tos and step-by-steps. It could come from step-by-step of images, like you might see here, or a collection of images, or other times, like we saw with the dryers pin in the previous slide, it might just come within the description. And that'll tell someone what to do, or lets them know that they need to click through to get the full tutorial. So we're looking through this. On the left side there, we have the Lowe's example. I love this one actually because it provides a lot of detail in the description on how to make a gallery wall. But then with the image, instead of showing it in a step 1, step 2 kind of look, it just gives more of a holistic view of how and what you're going to need to do. And then the description really gets into the different steps on how to create it. And then for Brit & Co., which is the second pin there, going in from the left to right, this is a step-by-step visual on how to make a DIY hanging planter. And this is where you could really lean on images if you want to do something like this. They're going to do the heavy lifting for you, and then the pin could actually click through for someone to learn more about how to do this. But this is enticing and showing them, oh, this looks simple. Now I could click through and actually learn how to go and make this myself. And then when you're moving forward to the next pin, the target pin, it not only shows products inside of the room on the actual pin, but I love that it also shows the products underneath it. And then additionally gives you detailed description in the copy on how to achieve this look. So it gives you the full look with the image, also shows you the different components that you would need to achieve it, and then describes a little bit more within the description. And someone might want to click through, or this might be enough for them and entice them to save it. Lastly, on the far right is another dryers pin. You'll see dryers throughout this presentation. They do a great job with their pins on Pinterest. This is just another example of providing detailed instruction through the description as well as with the imagery. All right, so multi-product shots is the next tip that we have, or thing that you can be testing with when it comes to creative. So multi-product shots give the person viewing the pin an idea of the variety of products that a business might sell. So whether you're in the market for eyewear, handbags, showing the different colors and styles of the products within your business's portfolio, this is really going to help people to discover more. So if you have a lot of different options that you have on your site, you might want to showcase them through your pins as well to make sure people, all different audiences and different types of people, would be enticed to want to click through, knowing that your brand or business has something for them. So an example of this, the Madewell pin on the left shows off a multiple array of product colors that someone could choose from. So I know they don't just have that color, that bag in brown, they also have it in a couple different colors. I like those better. Also looking at Warby Parker, this is a great use of how to introduce a new collection or line on Pinterest in an effective and helpful way. This gives people more of a sneak peek into their new fall collection and showing some of the different styles that they have. And then another thing with multi-product shots is that here with Wayfair, you can see, Wayfair actually is a company that has a lot of different things on their websites and has a lot of different offerings, which they call that out in the description. But then with the imagery, they really show you a different variety of how to amplify your backyard for the summer with different products that they sell on their website. So they're letting you know they have a lot of other stuff within the description, but then they also showcase a variety of things within the imagery as well. And lastly, with Teaks, similar to Madewell, they have a lot of different colors for the same product. So this pin is just going to give people an idea of the selection that Teaks offers. All right. The next tip is lists. So a couple examples of lists here. Curated lists can be really click through or save worthy depending on what's included in the list and how you position it. So this is because a list cuts out a lot of the work for someone who's searching for that recipe or that product. You can do this in a couple different ways. So you could showcase a list in the title, just calling out that there's going to be, more, or how to do it, or how to register. It could also use numbers. And then you can start to see what type of lists work best for different audiences and different products that you're selling, or different ideas that you're providing. And then you can go ahead and start making more pins like that. So really testing and learning with what type of list works best for your product or idea that you want people to go out and do or buy. So if you look at Ziploc, you can see they've done a great job creating pins more than just talking about their products. So they were used in a couple other examples as well. As well as with all of these examples I'm providing, you can see already where several of the tips or tactics might be used within one pin, but these are just examples showcasing this specific tip. But notice how it's incorporating a couple of the other different tactics within it. So a lot of these have great descriptions, and they're also lists, are great descriptions, and are also how-tos, are instructions. So if you get into the Ziploc pin, you can see that they're talking more than just about their product. It's more about them becoming a lifestyle brand, especially when they're using a list like this. So they're showing that you can use their product to house yummy freezer meals. So specifically 3 yummy freezer meals, which would make use of their product. So people could click through and find out more detail to get those actual recipes if they click through on this pin. And then if you move over to Pottery Barn, this registry encourages people to click through and learn more. And it has just simple text overlay that entices a person to find everything they might need to create their ideal registry. And this one actually doesn't include a number, so you can do a list without numbers, like I was saying. Also, the next pin shows a regimen or collection of products to help with brand awareness, and also creates a cohesive product story within one pin. And then lastly, just another example of using that number, letting someone know that they have, and this is also just multi-product shot additionally, so there's a couple different things happening in this pin, but for the list aspect, there's 16 wearable shades that someone might be able to choose from. So while I see this imagery and I can read the description, I might want to click through because I want to find out more about the different shades and what's going to match my complexion. All right, so text overlay. This is a big one, and it's really unique, I think, to Pinterest, and really great to see how text overlay can work for you as a brand on Pinterest, whereas on other platforms it might not be the same. But text overlay is a really great way to provide context, a clear takeaway, or elicit an action from a pinner. And like I mentioned, you can see some of the other examples we've already gone through for the other different tactics. It's used in combination with a lot of the other tactics to help make pins helpful, actual, and beautiful. So text overlay can be used in a lot of different ways. So while we don't have a limited amount of text on an image, make sure that the idea can still shine through with the image. So we don't have a limit. You can put as much text as you want on your pin, but we still recommend making sure that the image that's behind the text is shining through and really showing what you're trying to offer to a pinner. So make sure when you do use text overlay, make it part of the design, and be sure the text is large enough to be read easily on a mobile device. All right, so text overlays can be a couple different things. Like with the left, you can see that the text overlay for Jell-O provides awareness of the brand, all while using typography in a creative and unique way that really aligns with what Jell-O's brand is. And then also with another Ziploc example here, providing useful information with a direct call to action in the text overlay. So, oh, you have leftover soup, that applies to me, so I see this in my feed, and that immediately gives me context of what that is. And then also just looking at the Pampers pin next down the line here, this can be a really simple and succinct way with engaging copy that's going to entice a person to click through and learn more. So I love this pin because it provides so much context. If you just had this image without holiday safety tips across it, I don't think that a lot of people would know right away what this meant. It could mean anything from childcare or child tips, or it could be something to do with Christmas or lights. But because they say holiday safety tips in the text overlay, that really gives a pinner idea of what they can expect out of reading more from this pin or clicking through. And then lastly, just using text overlay to really showcase products here. So you can see they have the different products that they're offering from this specific line at Target of makeup brushes. And they're using that text overlay to show you the different brushes that they offer and what those can do for you. All right, we're getting down the line here. There's a lot of tips, obviously, that we can offer you. So this is great that you have this all in your arsenal now of different tips as you're thinking about creating your Pinterest creative and your pins that you're going to put out there on the platform. So we have two more. Tasteful branding is the next one. And this can be really valuable on Pinterest. And again, this is something a little unique to us that may be different from what you see on other sites and platforms. Including that branding really can help add credibility to your pin, but without being distracting or overly commercial. So here you can see a couple different examples of how people and brands incorporated their brand logo onto their pins and their creative. On the left, most of these have a watermark. So you can see the GQ, Lululemon, and Target. And then also there's another way that you can do it the way that Dreyer's did it, which is taking advantage of product placement that includes the brand name on it. So they have that actual ice cream bucket right there in the imagery that still provides that branding. Branding can also communicate useful information about the pin to people. So setting expectations for them around quality, price, style. Because I know that when I see this Target pin, this is a great example. So I know when I see this Target pin, I see that bullseye, and I know that I can expect a great quality and a great price out of that item. If it wasn't there, I might see this rug and not understand that this is something that I could actually afford or that was going to be a good quality for me in my style. Last thing to note with this is if you include your logo on the pin image, make sure it's large enough to be seen in the Pinterest grid view on mobile, but not so large that it's going to take up an entire image. You want to be tasteful when you're thinking about how you're incorporating these logos onto your pins. All right, last but not least, just wanted to call out using branded colors and settings. So showcasing products in an inspirational context by placing them in a background that conveys the tone of your brand. So you can play around with different types of photography or different types of coloring. If you're showing products on a white background, especially you want to play around with the way that you're doing coloring and photography, like for example with this Target pin. And then also just looking at the IKEA pin on the left, that's a good example of providing inspiration with the how to achieve a modern and beautiful dining room look. So that image is showing that for us, and that brand has branded colors and settings that make sense for IKEA, and that's really inspirational and clearly easy to achieve for us, knowing it's from IKEA. And then the branding across all of the platforms that Warby Parker is on. Warby Parker is modern, clean, and beautiful, and they also use that same kind of look and feel when they're creating their pins on Pinterest. And then also, like I mentioned, with the white backgrounds, the Target pin is just showing off one product, but in a really beautiful way. And then the description copy does the heavy lifting for them in this case, so they're using that detailed description also to inspire people with various ways to use scissors in your life, which who knew there are that many ways to use scissors, but I feel inspired that Target is showing me this beautiful image of these cool scissors and telling me more about how to use or create projects with the scissors. And then lastly, most people are familiar with the iconic Tiffany teal, so they want to make sure they're incorporating that within their brand or within their branding on Pinterest and keeping that consistent for us, because that conveys a certain quality and we know what to expect when you see that kind of Tiffany teal. So thinking about what color or setting you should use for your brand specifically, that's really going to depend for you. It depends on what your brand stands for and what you want to be conveying across Pinterest and in general for your brand. So there's going to be no one size fits all for branding, colors, and settings, or really for any of these tactics and tips that I've shared. It's really going to have to be specific to your brand and what you're putting out there and what action you want Pinterest to take with that idea or content that you're sharing with them. All right, so lastly, before we move into the next session, I just want to end on a couple tactical points that are really important as you're thinking about creating your pins. So keep these in the back of your mind as you're creating pins and you're thinking about the different tips and tactics you could play around with that we just walked through. Make sure that you're always using vertical pins. They take up additional real estate in the feed, especially when someone's viewing pins on mobile. So it's just the best way to make sure you're maximizing the amount of space and with your content across the platform. And then Pinterest is a highly commercial place for beautiful imagery like we talked about. So we want to make sure that the imagery is really beautiful and it's going to tell a certain type of story and really look nice because this is a visual discovery platform. So just a reminder that the pins, or just a reminder that the images, should be not pixelated and not of low quality. So again, like we mentioned, if at all possible, have them be professionally shot or as close to that as you can when you're using images. Also, hashtags don't really mean anything on Pinterest, so people aren't inherently searching by hashtags on Pinterest, and they don't really help you in search. So even if I searched, say, cookies or hashtag cookies, I'd be given the exact same results. So it kind of just clutters things up and not really useful on the platform unless it's tied to a bigger 360 marketing campaign that you're doing and it's essential. We'd recommend not using them. And then lastly, while we talk about branding and using logos, we want to make sure that you're not overdoing it. So brands are essential to providing ideas to people on Pinterest, but we don't want to overwhelm people either. So just making sure that you're tastefully using your brand in the description and not, trademarking every other word in the description and calling out your brand too much there. All right, so that was a lot of stuff and really high level, like I mentioned. I'm now going to get into more of creative by objective. So this really depends on what your goal, again, is with your business profile on Pinterest, what your goal is of having pins and content out there on the platform, or maybe what your goal is if you are running advertising with us, and how to think about different creative strategies and creative tactics by strategy. So I'm going to start with engagement and brand awareness. So that'll be the first couple of slides here. I want to first talk about the ad formats for engagement and brand awareness. So really the outcome you're looking for here is going to be brand lift, and that could mean a couple different things. That could mean awareness, intent, or purchase consideration. I'm going to quickly just play this video here and call out that video is one ad format that can help drive towards engagement or brand awareness. However, video will not be available until August, so just stay tuned for more information on that, but I wanted to make sure we mentioned that eventually this will be an ad format later this summer that you can take advantage of to drive the goals of engagement or brand awareness. And there's also rich pins. So rich pins essentially is just a code that's put on your website that's allowing for more information to be pulled in from your website onto Pinterest directly within that pin. So there's three main types of rich pins: product rich pins, recipe rich pins, and article rich pins. You may have seen these across Pinterest, and it just adds additional detail, can provide more context, automatically pulled in from your website. If you want to find out more about that, you can visit our developer site, and we also have a link to that at the end of this presentation that will be sent out afterwards. So find out more about rich pins on the developer site. Just know it's another ad format that can be utilized for engagement or brand awareness. And then standard pins as well, which are just the normal pin that you see across Pinterest, just the image and the description. All right, so a couple of creative tactics that map back to those different ad formats. So we have the ad formats, that's kind of where you're starting. And then let's think about different tactics to use within the actual creative to help drive engagement and awareness. And some of these things, actually most of these things, are things we discuss when we're talking about the overall Pinterest best practices. More just want to give you examples when it's specific to awareness, as well as when you're driving engagement. So if we're thinking about awareness here, there's tasteful branding. So we discussed that in the earlier section. It's really using branding to show the credibility on the left. So you can see TJ Maxx. We know that it's going to be affordable. There's also novelty, which is a new idea or a twist on something that a pinner may not have thought of before. So really increasing that awareness of your brand because you're bringing them something different and new that they might not have heard of. And then there's telling a story with your pin, as well as using lifestyle images versus product shots. This is a great example of that, featuring a product in a realistic setting, as well as like it's showcasing a lamp, for example, in this living room setting, as well as kind of telling a story about like your coworkers will never know that they're yoga pants. So it's telling a story as well as featuring a real life setting, the product in a real life setting here. And then lastly, just using compelling imagery. That's like a beautiful shot of pancakes and looks amazing. And then we'd all probably want to eat that, hopefully. Okay, a couple more tactics for engagement and awareness when we're thinking about specifically saves and impressions. So we were talking a little bit before about awareness. This is more geared towards if you want to get people to save your pins, as well as just in turn, when someone saves your pin, getting more impressions and virality across the platform. So highlighting a hero image on the left, you can see with Smirnoff, it's very clear that that's the product that's being promoted. So that's something someone might want to save because it's very clear that that's the image and product that's available. And then steps and product, step by steps and how-tos. We talked a lot about those in the last section, so I won't go too far in that. But just knowing that's another way that someone might want to save your content because everything that they need to know is actually right there within the pin, whether it's in the imagery or in the description. And then lastly, just talking a little bit again about rich pins. So adding detail with rich pins, we talked about that as an ad format, but additionally just thinking about it as a creative tactic. If you're thinking about different types of pins to put on your board or promote, people crave information, so rich pins just helps add more detail to that. All right. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about if you want to increase traffic and or sales. So a little bit different than branding and brand awareness. This is really about those direct response goals. So we have a couple different ad formats when it comes to direct response, depending on what objective you have. So one tap, I'm going to push play here so you can see what that is. Essentially, this is just taking out that close-up step when someone's clicking on a pin. They'll click on it and they'll immediately go to the website. So inevitably, this is going to help drive more traffic to your site and takes out that additional step. So really encouraging someone to see what they like in your pin, clicking on it, and immediately getting to your website to buy it or find out more. Then we have the app install pin. So if you have an app, this might be something that you could consider. Hitting play really quick, had to go back. So again, just a really quick view of how that works. The app install pin will directly take people to the app store to download it for both Android as well as iPhone. And then there's just the standard pin, which we mentioned, and the rich pins, which we mentioned before as well. And really, standard or rich pins can be used for any type of goal. It just really depends on the content and the creative that you have within the pin creative itself. All right, so a couple things for the creative within those ad formats that we talked about for traffic or sales. Specifically for traffic, we talk a little bit again about multi-product versus one product. So this helps speak to different tastes of people that might be coming in and also stimulates curiosity. So people might be more apt to click through. They know you have a variety of things on your website. For example, the pin right here shows multiple baby outfits that this little baby could wear, so you know that Carter's has more than just one look, and you can click through and find out more for your taste or for your baby. And then also lists, tips, and advice. So this is a great example of how-to, like using, again, text overlay and this in combination with a how-to and advice. So how to stay balanced between meetings is a good example of this, or how to teach someone how to do something, like with the hanging plant example, how to create that on their own, or even just giving people advice as well, like this. And then next, there's also using text overlay with a strong call to action. So this, for example, says sign up today. So you can actually use that. It's a strong call to action as well as utilizing the text overlay within the imagery. And like we mentioned, there's a couple different, you can always use a couple different tips or tactics within each pin, but these are just the primary things that we've seen based on our studies that can help drive traffic. And lastly is just using that real life setting. So having a person actually in the imagery and showing how excited they are and like what it means to get this box, for example, and what comes in it. Just helping people put themselves more in the position of what your idea is conveying, so that way they're going to actually want to go buy that themselves too, because they can imagine themselves there. So then if we talk a little bit more again about still kind of the direct response goals here for traffic and or sales, but this is specific to sales. Using that logo, again, mentioned that in the overall best practices, but using the logo on image to add credibility. This is such a great pin, mostly just because I love dogs, but this shows BarkBox in the corner. That's using that product placement too, where it's not necessarily a logo watermark, which totally would work as well, but this is more just the logo on product in that box that a dog might get through this program. And then also using real photos versus illustration. This is something you can definitely test, but we have seen for sales that using the real photo, similar to using real lifestyle settings, can help people really see themselves in this situation. So that's going to help increase more sales if you show real photo versus illustration. And then lastly, for sales, another tip would be to have a focus on the object you're promoting. So this is slightly different than if your primary goal is traffic. So this is more multi-product might drive more traffic, which we talked about in the previous slide, which can also lead to sales, but often a focus on one object can help drive the sale of that item in particular. So this is really saying like, okay, this is the bathing suit you're promoting here, and if I am really in the market for a bathing suit, I'm going to be more apt to buy because I see this one thing, it's honing in my focus for wanting me to go click through and buy this object. But we definitely recommend, again, testing both depending on what your objective is. So you might want to test with multi-products like we talked about in the last slide, or focusing in on one and seeing what works best for your business.